a shout out to my sister and friend since 1980, Reverend Candy Holmes. Candy and I know each other from way back when. Hallelujah, somebody. Martin Luther King describes power as the ability to achieve purpose. And then he goes on to say, what is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive. And love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power, King says, at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. And justice, at its best, is love correcting everything that stands against love. I start with this because many of us have been taught by our churches, by our homes, by our communities, that we are not supposed to have power. And yet, power is something that God placed in each and every one of us. It is, our very breath is a reminder of the power of God at work within us. But to do justice at its fullest requires, as King suggests, that we marry that power with love. And so today we're going to talk just a little about the issues of self-love. Now, if you grew up anywhere in a context like mine, the very words self-love were in their own way antithetical to what it meant to be a Christian. Because I was taught that we're supposed to be humble. No H on that. Just humble. What we did not understand is that when you integrate the Christian tradition, and note I don't say the teachings of Christ, but the Christian tradition, integrate that with the marginalization of the society for black folk. And then you add marginalization for LGBT folk. Which is why when the song that we love so well, Amazing Grace, when we get to the line that saved a wretch like I say, saved a soul like me. There are enough things in the society that tell me I'm a wretch. I will not sing those words over my own life. So, power and love is what I want us to talk about this morning. How do we integrate them on the inside so that when we do the work on the outside? See, in order to have justice out here, then I need also to have some justice in here. It's not about me trying to make sure other people have just experiences, and I am not also extending that love and power to my own life. So, you have the next slide? We ready to roll? So, here's the thing. Well, you can't see the top. It says social healers to the rescue. So I want to note these few things. On a plane, they say if there's a sudden drop in cabin pressure, well, what do they tell you? Put the mask on. Most of us when there's something happening, we are so focused on making sure other people are okay. And the reality is, when we do justice in that way, it lessens our own sustainability. So we might help a person or a context or a situation for a short period of time, but there's no sustainability in that when I am not also securing my own health and well-being. Many of us have passions. And it's my passion to do this particular justice work. Well, I want to help you know the root of word compassion and compassion comes from the Latin word passere, which means to suffer. So when I talk about having a passion for some particular justice issue or some particular problem that I see in society, it's not just I feel strongly about it. It's I suffer when I see this situation out here. It pains and aches my very being, but it also means this: when I see other people suffering, and sometimes suffering does not appear very readily to us, because especially if we are Black church folk, we have learned in church how to put on a face and act like everything is okay. Which impedes our healing. Because if I'm acting like everything's fine, then I can't get the kind of medicine, remedy, treatment, support, help that I need to address whatever the situation is. Which, for many of us, impacts this: that we have lots of unhealed wounds that don't get addressed. And I want to cite a few examples. There was a police officer who was called into a case where a child had been abducted and feared that some sex offender in the community had taken the child. And so when the police officer came across a particular man who was a known and convicted sex offender, when the officers went to arrest the man, this particular police officer jumped on this man and almost killed him. And everybody, his colleagues, were wondering, wait, it didn't take all of that. We could have subdued this guy. I mean, but this man went from broke. Only to find out later, and then a whole bunch of mess happened because of that, right? Only to find out later that this man had been sexually violating himself as a child and had never talked about it, had never told anyone, had never dealt with it. And so when it appeared to him that there was this sex offender, all of the stuff, all of the pain and hurt and shame that he was feeling, all of the rage that he had for years, it all came flying out on this man, only to find out later. Right, y'all know where the story goes. He did not do it. It was a big mess that happened because all of these unhealed wounds. So it's like this. Do you mind if I walk? I'm like, many of us have manure in our lives from various situations that have come. Now understand, since I'm not in the chancel, can I say the word? Some of us have shit. But here's the thing. Some of it comes because of hurts and pains. And some of it just comes from living. Now understand this though, the stuff that comes from the hurt and pain stinketh much. If any of you know King James Version of the Bible, when Jesus was inviting the folks to move the stone so Lazarus could come out, they were in a moment of healing potential. And what they say is, but he's been dead for 4 days. It stinketh much. Many of us, God is ready to do some amazing thing in our lives. And we respond with, it stinketh much. God, I don't really want to go into this. I don't want to have to look back at my hurt and my pain. And as black people, most of us have been socialized. We don't look. Child, no, we ain't talking about that. We're not airing our dirty laundry. You know all this. It stinketh much. So here's the thing about manure. There is nitrogen in manure. And when manure is stockpiled, because I don't have no shit. They do, but I don't. Stockpile, try to act as if the stuff did not happen. Everything's fine. Oh, God is good. All the time. God. And yes, God is good all the time, but that doesn't mean we don't have manure. And so the nitrogen in the manure, when it is stockpiled, the manure, I want you to hear this, can spontaneously combust. So every now and then, either in you or in someone else, you see this explosive emotional response, and you, what is that all about? It's a spontaneous combustion of stuff that did not get dealt with. Then stockpile. You or someone else. Now, I don't want anybody to walk out of here saying, I ain't never had a spontaneous combustion. I handle my shit. And no shame in it, just see it. We have been taught to do so much judgment, it blocks us from looking at what is, which is what then leads us toward the tendency to stockpile stuff. We need to look at it. Understand what was in there. What did I eat that caused this much stench? And some of it might have been something that I ate in church. But because somebody told me that's the theology I'm supposed to eat, I keep ingesting it, and it is thinking so much in my life and resulting in me stockpiling and then spontaneous combustion. The wonderful thing about the nitrogen in the manure is that when we are intentional in using that manure as fertilizer and place it on the very seed beds of our lives, whatever God has called you to plant and to grow, use it as fertilizer. What can grow can be greater than anything you imagine. But you got to deal with the stench in order to work with it and allow the incredible power of that nitrogen to be used not in counterproductive, haphazard, blow up, all kind of type way, to being used in productive, life-giving ways. Because you see, when we use the fertilizer in our lives, not only does it bless us, but everyone with whom we come in contact. Next slide. So, time heals all wounds. Some of you are old enough to remember Rose Kennedy, who was the mother of John F. Kennedy. And she was talking with someone about that expression, time heals all wounds. She said, no, baby. Time just brings some scar tissue. Self-protective scar tissue. And I agree with her. Time alone does not heal wounds. So many of us think, well, after all these years, I was only 12 when that happened. I'm 40 now, so I ought to be over it. As if time has some magical power to heal. Scar tissue. Time alone. But here's the beautiful thing. When we go into the realm of paradox, paradox is that which it don't seem to make no sense. And yet there's something so life-giving in it, even though it don't make no sense. I'm going to tell you this. A few years ago, I was in such pain. Someone I loved so much had hurt me again. And so the Spirit says to me, love like you've never been hurt. See, that's a paradox. I said to God, no. You want me to, what? That don't make no kind of sense, God. So then I was quiet. And I thought about this truth in my life, that everything God has directed me to do has always yielded a blessing. So how I know when God's prompting me? 4 things. 1, it don't make no kind of sense. 2, it is not aligned with my personality. 3, I just really don't want to do it. And then 4, that despite numbers 1 through 3, I have an incredible peace about it. So love like you've never been hurt. And so I said to God, well, okay, if you want me to do that, then you have to show me how to do it. Because I know how to run away and distance myself when I'm hurt. I know how to become verbally combative when I'm hurt. And some of us also know how to shut down, can't think, can't feel, get so disconnected. Those are 3 responses: the fight, the flight, and the freeze. It's not just 2, because many of us freeze. So we know how to do those things, but in paradox, go to the next slide. God invites us to do something that don't make no kind of sense, is not aligned with our personality, don't want to do it, because there's something transformative yet awaiting in the experience. It's like dealing with the manure, and I don't want to do it. Not aligned with my personality to deal with that messiness and stench. And don't make any kind of sense that using something that came out as manure and applying it on my life as fertilizer is going to yield something. That's a paradox. And so, I don't know if you can see this, but there's a cycle here that I want to talk with you about. At the very top of the cycle, beliefs and narratives. I use the word narrative because a narrative is a story that we write. It starts with someone in our lives writing for us a story. They write a story about who God is. They write a story about what an L, a G, a B, or a T person is. They write a story about what a black person or a brown person or a white person or red person is. Stories. What a man is and what a woman. These are narratives that are first written and given to us as children. As children, we don't know that it's a narrative. We think they're facts. And so then we presume, oh, well, if this is the fact, if I'm feeling some other kind of way, something must be wrong with me. And so we nip and tuck over the years those narratives and try to stay with it because we think it's a fact. They're stories. When I was in undergrad, and this might be why it took me 5 years to graduate, I never, and this is before computers, some of you don't remember that. But when I wrote papers for class, I never edited one paper. I don't like redoing things. So I type it up and hand it in. Ain't nobody told me I was supposed to edit it. So I handed in drafts and wondered why the professors were giving me a B. It was brilliant. So my narrative was, oh, this is all racism. And that's not to say some of it wasn't. But there was this small element of a draft. Many of us live our lives in draft and wonder why our lives don't feel as fulfilled as we know God is calling us to. Draft. That we're treating like it's a fact. When God is ready with us, in collaboration with us, to write something new. But here's why the love like you've never been hurt part is so critical, because when we love like we've been hurt, we keep staying in draft. It keeps blocking something. So, what's next up here? So, narratives, that's what I want you to get. It's a story that each one of us gets to rewrite. We get to edit it and ask ourselves, well, based on what God is telling inviting me in my spirit. I know what they taught me in church. I know what they taught me in my home. I know what the society is. But what God is telling me in my spirit, how does this align with this narrative? Is God inviting me to write something new? Why is this important? Because it leads then to how we perceive things in our lives. Here's a narrative. If I'm walking through a doorway, and there's somebody coming behind me, and I hold the door for the person, and the person does not grab hold to the door frame to help him or herself through. Now, if the person is another African American, I might say, you are just rude. If the person is Euro-American, I might say, this person is racist. So, you been there? But it's based on my narrative. When I treat it as if it is fact, then I don't understand that it's my perception based on a narrative. And so then I am likely, based on that perception, to start feeling some kind of way. Based on my perception. That I'm treating it as if it's a fact. So then I start feeling some kind of way. And then based on my feeling, I'm likely to make certain choices, take certain kinds of actions. But you see how it all goes back to my narrative. Narrative, perception, feelings, choices, and actions, which then lead to certain kinds of outcomes. So let me go to the example of, so if this is a white person coming behind the door, coming behind me through the door, if I have this particular narrative that white people are racist, then I'm going to respond a particular kind of way. And if I've already had a challenge in my day, if my man done left me, or I found out that my woman was having an affair with somebody else, and this person come behind me, and they don't hold the door, my action might be something less than that which would uplift the name of Jesus. Because I'm feeling some kind of way. I had a clergy friend years ago who used to say that he did not like to drive his car while wearing his collar. You know, just in case he was feeling some kind of way. So it's important to understand, what is my narrative? Because the thing of it, the reason I frame this as a cycle is because unless something comes and challenges my narrative, unless I relook it somewhere along the way, I'm going to keep coming back to reinforcing the narrative that I already have. So the next time someone comes behind me through the doorway, it is a reinforcement. So even if the person comes, and this one comes and gets the door frame, well, at least there's one. Am I telling the truth somebody? Can we have the next one? So really re-looking, what is the narrative? Because when we have certain narratives about particular groups of people, it impedes us from collaborating with them when we're seeking to do justice for them. Because we keep feeling some kind of way. So narratives are learned from family and church. I don't know about you, but I spent 20 years, despite what God was telling me, I spent 20 years feeling that it was not okay for me to be a lesbian. God kept telling me, baby, I knew when you were in your mother's womb. But what I was learning from my family and my church, I allowed to trump what God was telling me. As a consequence, many of the choices that I made during those 20 years were not life-giving. I ended up in mess after mess. God telling me all the while, I love you. Stand up and say that.
I heard that too. Just like y'all made you that way. I was 16, I heard it.
And so really paying attention, where did I get this narrative? And some of the people I may have gotten the narrative from were well-meaning. Next one. So, the thing about narratives and the manure and the spontaneous combustion and all of those kinds of things, they're greatly based in what our emotional anchors are. Everybody needs emotional anchors. But some of those emotional anchors can become those things to which we cling so strong that they become transformed or transmuted from anchor to attachment. An attachment is that which, if I don't have this thing, this way, I can't go on. And some of us are attached to what Mom and them said about certain issues in our lives. We might have let go of some, but other things we're still clinging to. And it keeps getting in the way of the fullness that God is inviting us to. Some of us are attached to what Reverend in our childhood church said. Now understand this, the human brain is still developing until we are about age 19 or 20, 21. Now get that. Because when those messages get in there in a still developing brain, they get in there deep. Because the brain's still growing and the message becomes intertwined such that we think the message is fact. So those messages we got in church early, or that we got from family or from school or whatever the context is, they're in those first 2 decades of our lives. We keep going to those as default beliefs, even when they leave us feeling broken. And it takes to create something new. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't, well, I know that's not true, so I'm just gotta keep working it. And so some of those attachments are religious beliefs that we have, family traditions. Some are the world view that we have. That's what I call the meta-narrative. And we have to have a meta-narrative. It's like the computer having an operating system, and if it doesn't have it, it doesn't work. And some of us don't upgrade the operating system, and when we try to put new programs on it, and it crashes, and we don't know why. Some of us become attached to relationships. And all codependence doesn't look like, or all relationship attachment doesn't look like codependence. Remember, attachment is, if I don't have this thing this way, I can't go on. Next one. And some of us are attached to our self-image. Now here's the thing. Next one.
Can you get it?
Self-image for years. Because everybody always told me, oh, you're so loving, and oh, you know, and since I was a little kid, I was the one people would come to be their counselor, as if I knew something. And so my self-image was, I'm peace and love. Peace and love. And Candy, don't tell nobody. But anyway, I didn't realize how attached I was to that narrative. So when people said to me, every now and then, Carrie, you are being mean and nasty, I rejected it. Oh, that's her issue. That don't have anything to do with me. Because I am peace and love. I held tightly. I'm peace and love. If you see me any other way, it is your issue. I did not understand that we human beings are multi-dimensional. So it wasn't until I let go of holding tenaciously to that self-image. Still held it because I am peace and love. But when I stopped holding on to it like this, I opened the possibility for me to become more of what I wanted to perceive myself as. It helped me grow. So now I'm more able to operate in peace and love. Much more than when I was clinging to that as my self-image and my identity. Many of us are attached to our social image, how other people perceive us. And so we have a certain swagger because we see, oh, that gets me this. Or we can be attached to our money, our education, our profession, all of these kinds of things that comprise our social image. Not just having it, but being attached to it. I don't know who I am if I don't have this. And some of us are attached to coping strategies that we have in our life. Because I don't believe in judgment, but just seeing the thing as it is. I put in the same box of coping strategies. Prayer, sex, alcohol, serving on the deacon board, singing in the choir, drugs. I put all of them in the same, they are coping strategies. They are those things that help us to cope with, not necessarily heal, but cope with whatever situations we're going. If we become attached to those strategies, then the very thing that can be life-giving for us can become life-demoting. For example, the person who is always the first and the last to be in church. How does that impact the rest of that individual's life? I gotta open the door and gotta close the door. Church can't go on without me. Service in church is a wonderful thing. And praise God for all of you who do any service in church. But if it is something that you are clinging to, unintentionally you might block the leadership gifts in other people that need to be birthed in the church for the church to be healthy. Next one. Coping strategy. Again, no judgment, just see it. And that's so, where did I get that one from? Is that serving me well? Is it helping or hindering me in having the life that I know God is inviting me to? Let's go to the next one. Every one of us wants to feel safe and special. And that's what the anchors that can become attachments provide for us. Helping us to feel safe and special. And understand, feeling special is also about feeling safe. Because then you feel, oh, if I'm special to you, when the chips are down, you will have my back. We want to feel safe. And when we do church in the ways that most of us have been trained to do church, many of us don't feel safe. Or we'll feel safe to an extent, but not for our full selves to have expression. And so this one says something about anxieties and expectations. So we all want to feel safe. And when the anchors become attachments, then anxiety is always a part of that equation. Because now I'm anxious that the thing that I need to help me feel safe and special, if it looks threatened in any way, threatened to be taken away from me or threatened to be changed, I'm going to feel some kind of way. Whatever my belief, my perception, my feelings, my actions, that whole cycle, my anxiety might show up in some ways that might not lead to the experience of peace and love, but more on the mean and nasty. Let's And here's the thing. Psychologist Carl Rogers said that in every moment, we are every age we have ever been. So think about that. Here's what I believe. Each one of us, our physical bodies, are like buses riding down the highway of life. And on the bus is every age we've ever been. And so when we see certain things, hear, smell, it could be off in the distance. If something triggers some younger age. It can either be a joyful experience that gets triggered, or it can be a very painful one. And when that happens, if it's a painful one, now I'm 57, but if something triggers something from age 17, then the 17-year-old wants to try to drive the bus. That was the one who had car accidents. Because she really didn't know what she was doing with her still developing brain. And I don't even know what's going on. Because my 57-year-old is fine with what she sees, but they're the 17-year-old or the 7-year-old or the 20, and I don't even know what's happening. Sometimes I might not even know that I'm feeling some kind of way, but my actions show. And so knowing all of who you are is important. Not acting as if, well, that happened in the past and I'm fine and ooh, I'm over it. She or he still up in there. Riding right along with all the rest. And spending time with those different ages. What you loved and what was painful for you. Let's go to the next one. Because in that moment, you can make choices that are not very helpful in leading toward the life you want for yourself or the work that you say you want to do in the world. One of the things that I think is really key to getting breakthrough, to be even more effective in the work that we do in the world. As Martin Luther King said, we need power and love. In the manure is a lot of power, that nitrogen. So you want to use that and use it seeded with love for yourself and for others. And so therefore forgiveness becomes very, very critical. Forgiveness is not about letting the other person off the hook for what he or she did or what they did. Forgiveness is about letting yourself off the hook. Because we're all connected, and when someone or some group has hurt you, then they do so because hurt people hurt people. And whatever pain was in their lives that prompted them to hurt you, there is a connection that happens between their pain and your pain. Forgiveness is how you cut that cord. Without forgiveness, we stay tethered to the pain of someone who hurt us, which then impacts our narrative, our perceptions, our feelings, our choices, outcomes, what our lives look like. And I decided I am not letting you who hurt me have that kind of power over my life. Amen. Amen. No way. Whether it's an individual or a group. No, not having that. It is our attempt to self-protect, but that attempt keeps us in a place that's really in its own way like a prison. That every now and then we get to come out into the prison yard. And we do a little something, helping other folk in the prison. But if you feel God calling you to ministry fully out in the world, doing this work on the inside, is absolutely critical so that the power, instead of it being stockpiled over here, that you're accessing that power and using it in every area of your life. Most of us know the story of being this person in this context and then being this other person over here. I can let these people know, and especially as LGBT Christians, I'm Christian over here, and I'm L, G, B, or T, or I, or Q over here. We can't fully operate in our power when we're segmented like that. And that's why I love the ministry of MCC. MCC Washington is where my spirituality and my sexuality became integrated for the first time in my life. And it changed my life. So now I wasn't, okay, now, who am I over here? And how much over here? And look, because I wasn't my whole self. And you know the expression, united we stand, divided we fall? That's not just about a group. Or maybe it is because it's about the group of who you are on your bus. For all of them to be united and to understand the multidimensionality of who you are. To have that kind of strength in an integrated self. Now understand this. The society, and this is true about every society, it has its particular expression and nuances in the U.S. society. Societies function by helping people not to be integrated, but fractured in some way. And when you add capitalism to it, and the religion of capitalism in this country, then I've got to set up a system that helps you feel like you are incomplete unless you have this product that I'm selling. So I want you to not feel full and whole and complete and integrated in who you are. So I can sell you something. Our theology often does that as well. And so it is easy for us to take in some things that ultimately end up being in the category of it's thinking much, because we have been told that we are incomplete, wretches undone, no good thing in our flesh. You know all of the things you've been hearing the speakers talk about over these past couple of days. That's what many of us have been feeding and feasting on. And we have believed it to be true. So if we get those kinds of messages everywhere, from mom and dad, from church, from the larger society, school, etc. Well, if they're all saying this, it must be true. There's something incomplete about me. There's something undone. I'm still needed. And you know, look, my hour is up. I just want to say this to you, and then you're going to, however long Michael says for you to be in your small groups after that. In every church that I have served as pastor, I have ended worship service with these words. God is as close as your very breath. in deeply and know the transforming love of God and breathe out fully and share that love in the world. When I first was given those words of benediction by Spirit, I did not understand the full import of those words. But when I saw congregation after congregation, worship service after worship service, people breathing, not just to the chest, but really down into their diaphragms, into their bellies. And then when people would stop me on the street and say, Reverend Carrie, would you say that benediction? Or people calling me on the phone, and churches where I'm not serving anymore, if I have contact with any members in those churches, they're always asking, would you say that benediction? We have been taught that God is something separate from who we are. I grew up with the song in the Pentecostal church, 99 and a half won't do. So in all my striving, and someone in this room said that word the other day, about so busy striving. Was that you, brother? That was you? Okay. So busy striving, so we don't get into the being yet. Can't do enough to be fully loved by God. 99 and a half won't do, and I'm only at 75. It's like this co-worker I had many years ago said to me, because there was a black woman when I lived in D.C., and I saw the differential treatment she had toward whites and blacks. And so I said to her one time, so tell me more about this. You know, this seems like a really nice white person, and you're just nasty. And so she said, well, let me explain it to you this way. With me, black people start at 100%. And depending on how they act, they can work their way down. And she went on to say, and white people start at 0. And depending on how they act, they can work their way up. So I said, well, with that particular paradigm, the most heinous and offensive black person might only get down into 60. And the most wonderful, amazing white person only get up to 40. And she said, well, many of us have lived with a theology that God relates with us at 0. And then we've heard 99 and a half won't do. And we're striving, trying to make 100. Today I might be at 85, but I might only be at 69 tonight. on Jesus. So anywho, I invite you to really look at what is the theology that you have. How does that theology help or hinder you in knowing that you are a unique manifestation of the very Spirit of God? That's why I pray that prayer, God is as close as your very breath. And what does your understanding of Jesus' ministry, how does it inform the connections you make between loving yourself, love your neighbor as yourself, and social action? We speak those words, love your neighbor as yourself, but we do little in helping people understand what loving self really looks like. Amen. So Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. How do we then express that in the world? And how do you make these connections as you show up in all the contexts that God invites you to? And I want to cite one person, Reverend Al Sharp, who has written a book, and I saw him appear on Oprah Winfrey a month or so ago, where he talks about the hurts and pains in his life and how those unhealed wounds impacted him to show up in the ways he did earlier. There was the Tawana Brawley and so many, many other things. And he was regarded in so many ways somewhat of a buffoon by people. Heart of passion and compassion. That man loves people deeply. But his unhealed wounds and the manure that was stockpiled in his life often yielded him showing up in ways that were less effective for accomplishing the things that he was seeking to do. I've seen him beginning to heal himself over the years. And he acknowledges, like all of us, still has some things he yet needs to heal. But as he's been healing, it has enabled him to shift how he shows up, impacting the lives of people. It is not just something nice to do for us to do our healing. It's critical. Not only for ourselves, but for the world. And so Michael, come and let folks know how long they have now in this